Says the Mishnah on the top of 19a. It says, B'kol kosfim, you can write the get with many, B'kol sometimes means with everything. Here it doesn't mean with everything, it means with many different things. B'dio, with ink. Ink in general, by Safros, you have to write the Torah scroll. Or Tefillah Mezuzos, you have to write with dio, with ink. But what does this mean here? Besam, Sikra, Kumus, Kankantum. The Gemara is going to discuss what these things are. B'kol davar shushal kayama, anything that will last. In kosfin, you cannot write a get to b'mashkin, not with a liquid, or b'meiperos, not with fruit juice. B'kol davar she'enu miskayim, you can't write a get with anything that won't last. Kol kosfin, you can write a get on anything. Al ha'ala shel zayis, you can write it on an olive leaf. Al karen shel para, on a horn of a cow. But no sin lost apart. But then you have to give the whole cow because we learned earlier in our Gemara, it says, because of the nasan, you write the get and you give it to her. But that means you can't be severing something in between. And then the al yad shel eved, and of course the Gemara discusses this example, and the Gemara is going to have a lot of discussion of this case. You write it on the hand of a slave, the no sin lost eved, but then you have to give her the whole slave as part of the get. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, "En kosen lo davar sheish b'ruach chayim lo ochem." You can't write the get on something that's still alive, and you can't write the get on something that you eat. By the way, this is a discussion we have in Mishlach Sukkah. Remember, you say, can you use an elephant as the wall of a sukkah? Remember, the Gemara has such a discussion. Okay, so now the Gemara says, what are these things that we spoke about? Dio is diusa. Dio is this ink. Sam is sama. Sam is this type of ink that's called sama. Rashi says it's or piment, or piment, which Rashi and Megillah seems to say is this yellow ink, which is poisonous. And then you have the next case. What's the next case? Is sama, is sikra. Sikra, what's sikra? Amar Rabba Barachana, sikarta, shman. This is a red dye. What's kumus? Kumus is this thing called kuma, which is sap. And kankantum, what's kankantum? Amar Rabba Barachana, Amar Shmuel, charta dushkapi. This is the black polish of the shoemakers. Ubekol davar shum niskayim. You can write with anything that will last. Lasuye mai. What's it coming to include? Lasuye haditani Rabbi Chanina. It's coming to include a case where kasru b'meitaria v'afza. If you wrote it with this type of water, rainwater, or gallnuts water, or this fruit juice soaked in water. So this was the type of ink that they had that was lasting. They had the technology to be kosher. Tana Rabbi Chia kasru be'aver. Let's say you took lead and you soaked it in water, or b'shachor, or with coals that you soaked in water, or b'shichor, or this black shoe polish that you soaked in water, or that you used, kosher be kosher. Now the Gemara is going to discuss the concept of writing in other areas of law, like, for example, not just a get, but by the way, there are only 4 mitzvot that it's required. You should just know that it's required to know how to do safros in order to fulfill these mitzvot. The 4 mitzvot are Torah, tefillin, mezuzah, and get. But there are other areas where writing is relevant. For Shabbos, if you write 2 letters on Shabbos, you're liable for writing on Shabbos. But the letters have to be lasting. They have to be something that's meant to last. Also, erasing, you're liable for erasing on Shabbos. But there too, you're only liable if you erase with the intent to rewrite that on that spot. So that's you're saying, like if you type an email, is that writing on Shabbos? It's not really writing. It's not really writing, but it's probably other prohibitions. On a blanket? Or right, so that's the question. Can you write in an area where it's certainly not going to last? Like let's say you write on a car, like in the fog or the steam. So these are things which are not meant to last. So let's say you take the black ink and you put it and you trace it over the red ink on Shabbos. They say you're going to be liable. Why? Chayev Shtayim, you're liable for 2 prohibitions. Achas mishum kosef, because you're writing the black over the red, so you're writing it. And also, achas mishum mochek, you're erasing the red by writing the black on it. So therefore, you're going to be liable for both prohibitions. Let's say you do dio al gabe dio. Let's say you do black on top of black, or sikra al gabe sikra. Then you're potter. If you do the black on the black or the red on the red, then you're exempt because you're not doing anything. You're just adding on to what's already there. You're just adding another layer. You're not doing anything. So you're not erasing and you're not writing really. Sikra al gabe dio. Let's say you write the red on the black. Amri lechayev, amri lepater. So there is a dispute. Some say you're liable and some say you're exempt. Amri lechayev. Some say you're liable because it's mocheku, because you're erasing. If you write the red on the black, so some say you're going to be liable because you're erasing the black. Why? Because the black is better than the red. So by putting the red on the black, you're erasing it a little bit. Amrulay Potter, some say you're exempt. Mekalkahu, because you're not really writing, you're just diminishing the black. And so that's called mekalkal, destroying, which is actually permitted. So now we have a next question. So Reish Lakish asked a fine question from his chavrusa, Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say if witnesses who don't know how to sign, they don't know how to sign. Can you first write it with them in red, and then the witnesses will come and they'll be the ones signing it by going over with the red with the black. So are we saying ksav elyon ksav o eno ksav? If you just write on top of something else with black on top of the red, is that going to be considered writing or not writing? So that's what Rabbi Yochanan asked. That's what Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan. He said to him, "Amarei eno ksav." It's not considered to be a writing. It's not considered to be a writing because the writing was already there. So what are you really adding? So he says it's not really a writing. He says, "Amarei v'alo imaratenu rabbeinu." But didn't our rabbeinu teach us ksav elyon ksav inyan Shabbos, that respect to Shabbos? If you write on top of something else, if you write with black on top of red, didn't we just say above that we learned you're liable for two things if you write with the black on top of the red, that you're going to be liable. So in fact you're liable for two, we said. So why in this case are you not liable? Why is it not a valid testimony? If we say on Shabbos that you're liable for writing the black on top of the red, why in this case is it not considered to be writing? So he says the answer. He says, "Amarle Rabbi Yochanan." I see. Just think because we have the idea to compare Shabbos by Shabbos, we said this. Do you think we're going to do an action on it? Meaning to say, so the Rashi says even by Shabbos we wouldn't actually say that you're liable to actually bring a sacrifice. So we're not going to apply it to the full extent of the law. Also, in this case, you're not going to say that it's a valid witness. Rambam says, no, you can't compare the two areas of law. One is Shabbos. Shabbos, you're liable, but by witness, it's a totally different type of action. Doesn't really make sense. It's they're both writing. We're trying to define writing. But one is to say liability on Shabbos, a different threshold than a witness signing it. Because by a witness, you want to show that his assent or his intent. By the writing on Shabbos, you want to show doing a prohibited act. Now the Gemara says another teaching. Idmar, Edim she'en yodim l'chtam. Let's say you have witnesses that don't know how to sign. Rav Amar Mekaran Lam Niyar Chalak. Rav says you take smooth paper, umamalim esakrayim dio. You take out the smooth. You have the smooth paper, and you etch into the paper, like you carve it out. Umamalim esakrayim dio, and you fill in this paper with ink. So that's all the witness has to do, is just to fill in the paper with ink. That's what Rav says. Shmuel says be'aver. Shmuel says that you don't fill it in with dio, but you fill it in with a piece of lead on the cloth, and that's all you need to do. So the Gemara says, be'aver salgadaita. Would you really think that it's okay if you filled it in with this lid? Do you really think that that's okay? So How can you say so? The first approach was that you etch it in. The second approach was what Shmuel was saying that 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 they first write it with lead, and then the witnesses come and they write their names with ink on top of the lead. So the Gemara is saying, but how could Shmuel say that the first people to write, like the people who know how to write, that they write it with lead and then the witnesses come and do it? On top of that, isn't lead a valid signature? So then it's already signed. Because didn't Rabbi Chia teach that if the witnesses would have just signed it themselves with lead or with coals or with this blacksmith polish, it would be kosher. So the Gemara says, Lokasha, Haba Ivra, Haba Mayad Ivra. So one is where they actually just used the plain lead. That's not an actual ink. But then there was the lead that was soaked with water, that would be an ink. So if they wrote it, the initial one with just plain lead, then the witnesses could sign on top of that with ink, and that's considered writing. But if they wrote it with the Mayad Ivra, with ink, then the witnesses wouldn't be signing if they signed on top of it. Rabbi Avo says, B'mei Milin. Rabbi Avo says that they wrote it initially with Mei Milin. That if the witnesses don't know how to sign, then the other witnesses, then the court should write first with Mei Milin. This is water that they soaked in gall nuts, and then the witnesses will write on top of that with their ink on top of the Mei Milin. Mei Milin is gall nut juice. So the Gemara says, really? Does that work? But you can just use the gall nut juice as a valid signature to begin with. So why would you say that the witnesses can write on top of gall nut juice? So the Gemara says, oh gosh, hard to offits, hard to low offits. So it depends how the parchment was prepared. That they used to do, they would prepare the parchments with gall nuts. So if the parchment was prepared with gall nuts, then what you could do is you could take this gall nut juice and write it on top of the parchment, because then that gall nut juice won't remain on top of the gall nut prepared parchment. It'll disintegrate soon. That'll give time for the witnesses, the real witnesses, to sign their name. And so, what? Can you eat it? Is it edible? I don't know what else they put in it. I don't know. It's they turn it into an ink. So that's but if it's not prepared, then the gall nut juice will last, and then it wouldn't be a valid way of preparing the document for the witnesses to sign. Rav Papa says, what do you do if the witnesses can't sign? You sign it for them baroque. You spit on the page, and then the witnesses just trace the spit. Like you run it in your saliva, and then the witnesses will write on top of it. Rav Papa Turah Baroque, and also Rav Papa showed to Papa Turah, that was his name, Papa the Oxman. He said you do it saliva. Body milling Gittin. This is only okay by a get, and the reason why they allow you to do this type of method is, Rashi says, is by a get because of the guna. Like, we're worried if you don't have witnesses to sign a get, the woman's not going to be able to be divorced. She'll become an aguna. And you can't find the witnesses. Like you're living in Iowa. I don't want to criticize Iowa. You're living in some place where there are no Jews who know how to sign their name in Hebrew properly, who are kosher witnesses. I have nothing against Iowa. I take it all back. I apologize to Iowa. I'm just saying you're living in some place where there's no strong Jewish community. So what do you do there? So then you have to do this method, or else the women are going to become agunot, but by other contracts, that's no good. You have to find good witnesses to sign it. Because there was a person who did this with another contract. They needed a witness to sign, and the witness was somebody who didn't know how to write his name. So they put a name for him in available in saliva, and they told him to do it. Rav Kahana gave him lashes. He said it's a bad approach. I don't know what they do in American law, but they probably figure it out some way. Tanya Kavase de Rav. So now we have a brisa which supports Rav's opinion. Again, let's go back. What did Rav say? What did Rav say? Rav says that you etch out the piece of paper and then they sign on top of it with ink. Tanya Kavase de Rav. Edom she'en yodim l'chtom mekar lam niyar chalak u'menal misakroim deal. witnesses don't know how to sign it, then you tear the paper, you etch it out for them, and then they just fill in the ink. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that only works by divorce. But by all other contracts, including slaves, if they know how to read and to sign, he adds in reading, you notice that, chosman. Then we let them sign it. Otherwise, we don't let them sign it. Gemara says, why is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel adding in reading? Rav didn't say any, the Price didn't say anything about reading. Why they added in another dimension here? You have to know how to read. So the Gemara says, it's missing some words. This is what it means. If the witnesses don't know how to read, you read before them the chosmim, and then you sign. Then they sign. And if they don't know how to sign, then the first opinion is you etch it out. And Shimon Gamliel says that only works by women, by a get, but not by other ideas. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you can't let them sign unless they, by all other contracts, unless they know how to read and to sign. Any questions, Steve? But by a get, we're lenient because we want the woman to be able to get a divorce, or else if you don't allow it, you're going to make it very hard for a woman to get divorced. I'm Rabbi Lazar, my time with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So he says, what's the reason why Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who allows you to sign on a get, even though they don't know how to read or to sign, even though on other contracts he's not going to allow it? Because he doesn't want the Jewish girls to end up as agunos. He says we have to be lenient. We're going to even allow witnesses who don't know what they're doing. So otherwise, we're going to have a very difficult time with these girls getting divorced. Amar Rava halacha k'rashbag. He says that's the halacha. So we see from here, by the way, if you always have to say, like, it's so hard to remember everything from the daf. You want to take one message away from today's daf before we even stop. The rabbi said we're going to be lenient by Gittin to allow women to remarry so that they're not chained to a dead marriage. And that is, we allow even witnesses who don't know how to sign their name or read to be the witnesses. So Rava says the law is like Rashbag, meaning to say only by Gittin. But Rav Gamda says the law is not like Rashbag, so meaning to say, Elakaman, who's it like Rabbanon? It's like the Rabbanon who allow these types of witnesses by all contracts, not just by Gittin. Gemara says, Rabbi. But 1 second, there was a person who did this by all other contracts, and Rav Kahana struck him. Gemara says, Tirgama Akriya. No, so explain that when Rav Gamda said the law is like Chachamim, they will allow by all Ashtaros, that refers to the reading, where the witnesses don't know how to read, but they know how to sign. And there, the law is not like Rabbi Shmuel, like Chachamim, that others can read it for them. But where the witnesses don't even know how to sign, then the law is like Rashbag, that they're not allowed to sign. And so in the case of Rav Kahana, the witnesses did not know how to sign. And so there, he's saying, there you can allow the other witnesses to sign it on their behalf. Yeah, you had a question, Baruch Yosef?
Well, just if you want women to be able to divorce with leniency so that they can divorce, why not also do the same thing for marriage? Like isn't it the exact corollary with marriage?
So the Baruch Yosef is asking, well, why don't we allow them to get married more easily? So first of all, you don't need a contract to get married. You can get married. You can betroth a woman with what's called kesef shtarubiyah, with money or with relations or with a contract. So you don't need a contract to get married. And also there's a difference between getting married and getting divorced. Getting divorced, the rabbis were much more lenient with respect to getting divorced than with getting married. Okay. But that's a good question. So the Gemara continues now. Rav Yehuda mitzdayer kari v'chatzim. Rav Yehuda, his eyesight was diminishing. It was hard for him to read. So mitzdayer kari v'chatzim. So it would be very hard for him to read because he didn't have his reading glasses. So what was Rav Yehuda doing? Mitzdayer. Rashi says zakinaya. He was older, and his eyes were diminished. And so when he needed to sign as a witness or a judge, He knew how to read, but it was hard. So they would read it for him, and then he would sign. So Rabbi Yehuda mitzvah kari v'chasim. Amoy ula lo tzrichas. You don't need to do that. He says, Da Rabbi Lazar maradar tzra. Rabbi Lazar was the expert on the land of Israel. Why? Why was Rabbi Lazar the expert in the land of Israel? So, because he was the expert, because we know that in Mesachas Nida, Rashi explains us that he was able to tell the difference between all the different shades of blood, to know which was blood and which was not, to purify a woman from Nida. So, and Karu Kamei V'chasim, and they read it before him and he signed. So we see that if you know what you're doing, you don't even need to, if you're a real Torah scholar, you don't need to read it yourself, because everybody knows, Shkoyach, my friend, everybody knows that you'll read it properly, that they're not going to lie in front of you. And also Rav Nachman, Karu Kamei Safrei Diyane, the scribes of the court read it before him and he signed. The Dafka Rav Nachman, the Safrei Diyane, when do we allow this? When the person was Rav Nachman, he was the head of the court. He knew what he was doing, and the scribes of the court. This Luei Masa, everybody was afraid. These guys are experts, and you know that they're not going to mess up, and you also know you're not going to lie in front of Rav Nachman. Avo Rav Nachman v'Safrei Achrinim. But if it will be other scribes who are not the scribes of the court, or Safrei Diyane v'Inish Achrinim, the scribes of the court, but not Rav Nachman, whoa, then we wouldn't rely upon this leniency, because we need to have only a very, very specific, like it's such a public thing. You have Rav Nachman and the scribes of the court, then we're not worried that you're going to say something which is not actually there. Rav Papa Kiavi Asla Kame Ishtara Parsa, David Barko Shakutim, Makri Uhu Ishnei Kutim, Zelit Shalom B'fnei Zeb, and Fiachofi Tumo, Magbi Ben Mishabdi. When Rav Papa, when they would bring in front of him a Persian contract, he didn't know how to read Persian, or maybe he didn't know how to read it well enough. So what he would do is he would bring along two Persians, and he would have them read it to him, not in front of the other. So you have two people reading to him in different places to make sure that, to verify what they were saying. And he had them read them without telling them what they were reading. It's called Masir Tumo. He didn't say, I needed to say this. They couldn't have known that what they were reading was relevant. He would be like calling out to them, oh, do you mind reading this for me? And so that way he would understand what it was saying. And when he did that, he relied upon so much that he would even collect from property that there was just a lien on, meaning to say not free and clear property. But if the contract said you owe me $1 million starting from January 1st, and then the guy went ahead and sold his house on February 1st, he would use that contract to go back and seize that house. So that's how much he relied upon it. Amar Avashi, Amar Rafuna Barnas, and Hachi Amar Amemar, Hai Shtar Parsai, the Chasimile Sadi Yisrael, Magbina Memi Mishabdi. So he said, if you have a Persian contract where Jews signed, and presumably Jews didn't know the Persian, then you could use it to collect even from property where there's a lien on it. The Gemara says, but they didn't know how to sign it. Who didn't know how to sign? They didn't know, these witnesses, they don't know what they're reading. But we're talking about where the witnesses knew what they were reading. So the Gemara says, but the Persians write their contracts. We need a contract that's not forgeable, and the Persians aren't careful about that. The Gemara says, no, they treated the parchment so that it couldn't be forged. But we have another thing. And when we write a contract, we make sure that the last line repeats some of the material that was said at the beginning. That way you make sure that it's the same contract. The witnesses know they're signing. The Gemara says, Vileka. But in the other, no, it goes back. So if that's the case, on my Kamashmalan. So what's it telling us? He's doing everything. So he said the Kolash and Kasher. It's teaching us that you can write a contract in any language, even in Persian. The Gemara says, but Tanina, but that we already learned in the Mishnah. Get Shekaso Ivris. Let's say you have a document, a contract that you wrote in Hebrew, the A.W. Varnitz, and the witnesses are Greek. Maybe this is referring to an actual divorce. A divorce that you wrote in Hebrew and the witnesses are in Greek, or Yavanis, the A.W. Ivris, and then the get was written in Greek and the witnesses are in Hebrew. Then we're going to say it's kosher, and so therefore it's clear that a get is kosher in every language. What's Amaymar teaching us about this Persian contract? Mar say if was just from that later case. Avamina ani mili begittin. I might have said that's only by gittin that it's kosher in any language because we're worried about agunot. I wouldn't have realized that you can rely upon another contract in another language Kamashmalai. We see from here you can rely upon another contract in another language. So now the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, Shmuel taught, Nasanu on Niyarcha. Let's say the husband gives his wife a plain piece of paper and there's nothing written on it. The Amar Law, and he says to her, this is your divorce. There's nothing written on it. Big Rashish, she's still divorced. Why? Means, the commentaries say means we have to be concerned she's divorced and apply the stringencies as though she's divorced. Why? We're worried she wrote it in these gall nuts, this gall nut type of juice, and afterwards it got absorbed into the gall nut paper, like we saw earlier. So it's like invisible ink. So we have to worry it was written there and it became absorbed. So even though there's nothing on it now, we have to be concerned about that. So the Gemara says, maybe we have a contradiction. Let's say that we have a different case. The husband gives her the divorce and says, this is your divorce. And then he takes it back and throws it into the sea or into the fire, or he destroys it. And then he says, actually, it wasn't a get that I gave you, even though he says this is your get. But then he takes it back before anybody could see it and throws it and destroys the get. And he says, actually, what I gave you was a different type of contract, either a shtar pasim or shtar amana. Shtar pasim or shtar amana is not really relevant for us, but just so you know what it is, shtar pasim, a guy wants to show it's a document of appeasement. The document of appeasement is that he wants to show that he's got a lot of money. He has to get a mortgage or something. So he has a guy write him a document, I owe you $10 million. But he has such faith that the guy knows he's not going, the guy who writes him that document, it's fraud. He knows he's not going to make the claim against him for $10 million. He wants to show like the other people, look how rich I have. This guy's giving in, I have collectibles of $10 million out there on the street. But that's called a shtar pasim. And he says, that's why I destroyed it. It was like basically a worthless contract. Where shtar amana, he says, it's the opposite way. He says, I owe you $1 million. Basically, I write the contract now, and when I take the money, then I'll owe you the money. But we trust each other, so I'm writing it in advance. So he says, I destroyed this worthless contract. You don't have to worry about it. Then we're saying under that case, the mugareshes, so under those cases, the law is that she's divorced, and we don't believe the husband to prohibit her. So in that case, where the husband gave her a document, says you're divorced, and then he destroys it, and he claims, I gave her a different contract. There we say she's divorced, and we don't believe him to prohibit her. Where in the first case, we said that if he gave her this document, which is nothing on it, we say we have to be concerned she's divorced because maybe it was on it and it was absorbed. So it's two contradictory ideas. You had a question, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm assuming that this is done in front of witnesses.
Yeah, okay. So I mean that's almost irrelevant but to the larger question of do you need the witnesses there for it? But let's say there are witnesses. Okay, let's say there are witnesses. Fine. So the Gemara says, Daima the Ika Ksav. So the Gemara says from the Gemara challenges Shmuel's ruling. Again, Shmuel ruled that if you gave her something and then there was nothing on it, we're going to still say she's divorced because maybe it was absorbed. But in this case, what's the reason? What's the reason why we say she's divorced? Only because there's writing on it. Haleka ksav, whoa. But if there would be no writing on it, and he can't make a claim that it was shtar pasim or shtar amuna, then we would not say she's divorced under those circumstances. So how is Shmuel able to claim in this case where the writing was absorbed, where he claims she's divorced because maybe the writing was absorbed? It flies in the face of this brisa. So the Gemara says no. Kikamer Shmuel. Where did Shmuel say where that she's divorced if he gave her this blank document? Now what happened was, where first we checked the document in this type of solution that they used to use, that they would, when they brought it over the paper would the ink would come back out. So like they maybe Rabbi Stefanski showed this on his YouTube where where you pull it out. So the Gemara says you pull it. The Gemara, hold on one second. The Gemara says, well, if the ink jumps out, pull it. Then it jumps out. The low pull it, lav kumbu. So if the ink jumps out, then we're going to say he gave her the get. But if he didn't, the ink doesn't jump out, it shows her nothing. The Gemara says the keep pulling my havi. How should the pull? But why, if the ink jumps out at this point, we say it's a valid get? Why don't we say right now it's coming out? But when he gave her the get, it wasn't there, so it shouldn't be considered like he gave her anything. The Gemara says Shmuel Nami Chayshirin Kamar. Shmuel's not saying that she's actually divorced. Shmuel's just saying we're concerned that she was divorced. What did you have a question, Jeff?
No, the basic principle is you have to record something that lasts, right? And this is an example of something that didn't last.
Well, no, it lasts. It's still there. It's still there. You just can't see it. It's still there. You just can't see it. You could pull it out afterwards. Amar Avina, Amar Liameimar, Amar Liameimar, Hachi Amar Liameimar Mishnei the Rav Dimi, Hani Beitrei the Yav Guti Kamayos Tzrichul Nekraya. He says these two witnesses who bring the get in front of us, they need to read the get before it's given. Meisvei, is this really the case? They need to read the get. If somebody says this is your get, the woman takes it before reading it and tosses it into the sea or cold over of it, or she destroys it. And then he claims, oh, it wasn't a get, it was some other contract. She's divorced. And she's allowed to be with another man. And if you want to say that it needs to be read, then how can it be? If they read it, how could she claim? How could he then claim it was another document? So we don't understand. The Gemara says no. It's the basa de Korea. No, even if he read it, he put it in his sleeve and pulled it out. Do we have to be concerned he did a magic trick? You know what I'm saying? So the Gemara says, we're not worried about that. You might say, oh, do we have to be concerned they did a magic trick? No, you don't have to be concerned because it's presumably that can. All right, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, happy to address. You had a question, Eli?